Ladies and gentlemen, I am SidAlpha, and the world of early access titles are fraught with peril. Scams and unfinished projects abound on Steam, while quite often we will see developers shutter their doors for a variety of reasons, and such is the case with HELLON, a space sim survival game by Zero Gravity Games that announced that they would be closing down development in October of this year. Now, this game was actually presented to me by numerous individuals as a potential dirty dev. Initially, I was not going to place the developers onto this list and was simply going to create a post-mortem style video discussing the history of the game, the monumental problems experienced by the players, and the compounding difficulties that eventually led to the game's demise. However, after reading through numerous discussion threads and updates surrounding the game, and even seeing one of the developers directly contradicting the statements of the development cancellation announcement, I decided that the developers deserved to be placed on the Dirty Devs list, mostly due to their financial decisions, which, while I can and will offer up a likely explanation for their reasons as to why, it will in no way excuse what they have decided to do. And as everyone really seemed to enjoy the format and style of the previous video, I will endeavor to make some additions to future videos, including this one, to follow suit. As that is the case, let's start off with the beginning, which would be the game's launch. In terms of the game's coming into existence, the initial life cycle of HELLON was about as standard as one could get for 2016. It seemed to be an exceptionally promising presentation of a survival genre title, and by all appearances, it should have remained a successful title. Unfortunately, that was not what ended up happening. HELLON was posted onto Steam's Greenlight system in April of 2016 as a sandbox survival game set inside of a space sim that promised a good amount of features, such as resource gathering, ship piloting, a crafting system, and a background story that reveals the truth behind the devastation of HELLON. Along with those comparatively standard survival game mechanics, the game also stated that it would include full Newtonian physics for all objects within the game, which include a full-scale solar system complete with orbital mechanics for all in-game objects, zero gravity, which should be a fairly obvious addition as this is a space simulator after all, realistic sound physics that are based on environmental pressure, in-game communications with both proximity voice chat and radio communications, a permadeath system, large multi-crew ships, a ship-to-ship combat that per the Greenlight page includes detailed scanning, targeting, weapons and electronics warfare systems, subsystem destruction, and realistic damage effects, and close quarters combat that purports realistic wound models. By May 10th of 2016, Zero Gravity Games announced that their Greenlight page had risen to the 13th place on Greenlight, all but assuring their acceptance through the program. And then a scant 2 days later, Zero Gravity Games announced that HELLON had been successfully greenlit. It's also worth noting that on the same day, May 12th, Luke Plunkett of Kotaku released one of the shortest articles on that site that I think I've ever seen in my life, which the entirety of that article can be seen on your screen now. The game then launched onto early access the following year, on April 24th, 2017. And if one were to inspect the progress of the game based solely upon information coming from the developers, it would appear that there was nothing out of the ordinary happening. There were massive numbers of game updates, and the developers continued to release numerous videos on YouTube showcasing different elements of the game and updates. However, those videos came to an abrupt end, with the final video HELLON prototype being released on February 25th of 2019. That video was a post of what the HELLON prototype had initially looked like very early on in its development. Updates, added game features, and bug fixes continued on, although the last announced patch was the 052 update that was announced on August 13th and went live 2 days later. After looking through the application history for the game, it can be confirmed that this was the last and final update to the game that Zero Gravity Games would produce. In terms of the launch and the updates, which showed a heavy investment on the part of the developers who seemed to be very communicative with their community, HELLON should have been on the fast track for success. However, the cracks were showing, and the game exhibited several fundamental problems that we'll cover in the next segment. The game itself to this day remains for all intents and purposes a buggy mess, and it is the nature of the bugs and their severity that seems to have ultimately caused the downfall of HELLON. Looking back through the Steam discussions for the game, there remains page after page of bugs being reported and numerous contradictory claims being reported surrounding many of the issues. This has presented a bit of a challenge in terms of being able to accurately determine what are even bugs and what are simply a bit of user error. One particular issue was this post about Shattered Dreams, where the hackport's visual element for the security station were apparently placed on the wrong side of the door. This was apparently a known issue where one user was thankfully able to help out. Then there is this post that explains an exploitable bug within the game that also seems to be widely known. Apparently, a player can fly close to a door, log out, press forward, then relog into the game and be able to move about freely. This apparently works within other players' bases as well, and as the game's code still considers the person to be outside of the station, any static defenses that have been constructed will do precisely nothing to the intruder. And in reading through these discussion posts, I found an interaction that summed things up rather nicely. And of course, I will post links to any of these sources used down in the description. One user stated, "The bug where when you warp back to your base and you come out of warp inside your base and the ship and base start exploding around you. That one's really annoying." And responding to that, the user AceCool had the following to say. Yes, that is another devastating bug, and it has been happening more and more since the new updates. Previously, it only happened once with the new update. 3 warps it happened to me, inside an asteroid, inside of home base, and inside a quest base. Each time, my ship was badly damaged, but I was able to survive. Previously, when it happened before the update, my entire station took damage, every single piece, which took about 2 or 3 welders to repair. It wasn't as bad as the current time around, but if it does, it usually does damage everything on your base. It is playable until you encounter a bug. If you have everything on your ship from a loot run and encounter a teleportation bug, you lose everything. If you warp into your base and your ship dies, you lose everything. That happened to a friend, although the modules he was most concerned about survived, but he still lost a lot. Previously I've had ships spawn inside of ships. That's an annoying one too. When I read that, I couldn't help but get the impression that the core issues with the game went well beyond simple glitches or misplaced objects within the world. This seemed to me that collision detection itself was fundamentally broken, which would certainly explain the majority of these issues. And as these problems have apparently persisted since the game's first release in early access, I also wonder if the developers spent most of their time chasing down individual bugs without ever determining or even thinking to seek out the root cause. He continues, "And yes, you need to relog after every warp, it seems. You need to relog almost every time you enter/exit your ship. You end up ramming into invisible station elements, or you end up with desync and something isn't where it is showing it is, but can still damage you on your client because the server trusts 100% of what the client says is true. If you, the client, tell the server that you kill someone, that person ends up dead, even if it is impossible for that weapon you have to hit that person where they are, i.e. planets away. If you run into a station that isn't there, or a station which is but is invisible, if you warp inside your station but relogging would have the station not be there, then you can still die. There are too many bugs to make the game quote-unquote playable." Now, this is important, I think. Granted, I'm no developer and perhaps I should learn to code a bit so I can gain a greater understanding, but it looks very much like the foundation to the game's core components was broken to begin with, and the developers had to fight the Unity engine in order to attempt to hold everything together. Couple that with adding on new features fairly regularly onto an already broken base, and it's no small wonder that everything remained broken and buggy despite their best efforts to clean everything up. And of course, the constant frustration experienced by the players very much created a circling the drain effect where, when new patches or features were released, the game would see a corresponding uptick in players. However, that dropped off relatively quickly afterwards, and the daily concurrent player base has continued a downward trend where the game now has only about between 20 and 50 concurrent players all through the month of December. It's never a good feeling when the game's development gets canceled. It is at that point in time that the developers are admitting and accepting defeat, and at the same time it is a sad day for the fans who continue to play and enjoy the game, accepting its flaws and all. It is also never a good feeling when some people who see the developer's statement as somehow blaming the players of the game as the primary reason for the game's failure. In a statement released on October 15th, Zero Gravity Games said the following: "Unfortunately, the cruel reality is, not enough players were brought into our world of Hellion to make it commercially viable. After the sloppy start of the game, predominantly in terms of bugs and issues, we gave our best to fix the game and add new content via numerous patches and updates. Hellion grew, got better, but it is still far from the original idea of what Hellion was meant to be. Factions, additional ships, trade posts, all of this was simply put aside since our team was constantly fighting technical issues, some of which were simply impossible to be solved for good. That struggle is coming to an end. At this point, without an influx of new players, the game doesn't pay for its development. That's why we had to make some hard decisions. Zero Gravity can't afford for further development of HELLON. There will be no new updates, bug fixes, or any official changes to the game. However, since the game is playable and we believe it offers a unique gameplay experience, we want to keep it going for players who want to enjoy it. HELLON will leave early access without achieving goals we originally set out to do. In order to keep the servers up, we will continue selling the game on Steam. Since the game is not fully finished, the price will be lowered to $15 starting tomorrow, October 16th. The control over the official servers will be handed to HELLON's Discord moderators. Moderators will stay in touch with us for any important events that might occur. Now, the first portion I wanted to focus on is this statement: not enough players were brought into our world of HELLON to make it commercially viable. This is the statement that so many people are claiming that the developers are blaming the fans. I really don't see that to be the case. If you have a team that is working on a game, income is needed. And if not enough people are buying the game, there is no income. It's really just that simple. Of course, I'm quite certain that people will argue that the developers could continue to work on the game in their off time. However, I firmly believe that it was due to the insurmountable nature of the bugs within the game that forced them to reach this conclusion. The developers were caught in a cycle of attempting to repair damage that they were not capable of fixing. Whether it is a foundational issue due to the components within the game and with the Unity engine itself, or whether it is simply the developers not possessing the technical skill required, is something we will never know. However, one of the members of Zero Gravity Games painted a very different picture than what we were shown with the public statement. And my apologies, I have no idea how to pronounce this person's name, so I will simply refer to them by their Steam name, Lekka. Lekka was the lead production artist for the game, and they had the following to say: "Guys, what can I say? Some of the people who wore the whole organization on their shoulders have come to various disagreements. Some of us wanted to continue the development, striving to rebuild and improve the gameplay, but others decided to abandon the project itself and use the funding from it to fuel their new projects. It is a shame, really, but hey, that's what happens when the whole love and gaming fervor gets replaced with pure business models. I apologize on my behalf and on behalf of those who wanted to continue this project." And it is because of this new additional information surrounding the decisions made by some members of the team that have led me to placing Zero Gravity Games on the Dirty Devs list, and I will explain the reasoning behind that decision in the next segment. There's an old saying that is often incorrectly attributed to Winston Churchill that states, "Success is not final, failure is not fatal, it is the courage to continue that counts." Failing to deliver a final and completed product is not something that will land a developer on the list of dirty devs. Failing to repair bugs is also not something that is inherently anti-consumer. However, from what can be gathered, the team did have an internal disagreement as to how to proceed, and it appears that the take the money and run side of the argument ended up winning out. Some of us wanted to continue the development, striving to rebuild and improve the gameplay, but others decided to abandon the project itself and use the funds from it to fuel their new projects. And in my mind, this is at the core of the issue right here. The people that bought the game on early access did so knowing full well that the game was incomplete and in active development. However, they did so under the firm belief and understanding that the money they paid for the game would be used for development on that game. In no way were any of them paying money for a game only to see the game be abandoned and the money go somewhere else. Allow me to state my opinion on this matter more directly. Your game is in early access, but you still have money in the bank. You want to shut down development? Fine. There's legitimately no issue with that. However, if you still have money from the early access purchases, then you as the developer have an ethical duty and obligation to see those funds used on the game itself, not somewhere else. Of course, development on the game will not be finished either way, but the money paid for the game should most certainly go towards, at the very least, fixing up the game as much as possible with the resources left to you from those early access purchases, to give the players that will remain the best possible playing experience for that game. Because the people that paid for this game paid for the game. They didn't pay for the developers working on the game's continued survival after the fact. Now, I can understand wishing to continue the survival of the developer's studio, however, that is not at all what people were purchasing. In all honesty, these developers took on this project and got in over their heads. That is understandable. But at the same time, there's nothing that can be said or done to lend any credence to the concept that history will not repeat itself. This also sets a dangerous trend. Start up early access title, run it as far as it will go, shut down development, take the money, change studio names, wash, rinse, repeat. And I also have a personal qualm in regards to the game being released from early access, because that denotes a completed game. And this game is most assuredly not complete by any stretch of the imagination outside of it not being worked on anymore. And it is the simple fact that instead of taking the money that people paid and utilizing it for the development of the game, and instead are simply cutting and running with whatever amount of money they have left, is why Zero Gravity Games has found themselves on the dirty devs, because their actions here are utterly dishonest and devoid of ethical standards. And once again, ladies and gentlemen, I am SidAlpha, and I'll see you next time.